The day I found out my dad was being appointed as the first Centaurian ambassador to Earth, I accidentally set our kitchen on fire. Not with regular fire, no, that would have been too normal. Instead, the flames were a brilliant shade of purple, a side effect of my nervous energy manifesting itself through my species' natural bioluminescence. Mom wasn't thrilled about having to explain to our neighbors why ultraviolet light was shooting from our windows at 3 in the afternoon. That was 6 months ago. Now, as I stand before the imposing brick facade of Roosevelt High School, I wish those purple flames would return and burn away my anxiety. But no such luck. Instead, I'm stuck here, trying to make my holographic appearance modifier look as natural as possible while simultaneously attempting not to throw up my breakfast. Remember, Kira, my dad had said this morning, his crystalline eyes shifting through various shades of concern, you're not just my daughter anymore. You're a bridge between two worlds. He'd adjusted his own holographic disguise, the one that made him look like a distinguished human diplomat instead of the 7-foot-tall, iridescent being he actually was. The success of our mission could depend on how well you integrate. No pressure, right? I take a deep breath and adjust my backpack, feeling the weight of not just my textbooks but an entire civilization's hopes. The hologram technology makes me look like a perfectly normal 16-year-old girl, average height, dark hair, olive skin. But underneath, my true form sparkles with constellations of bioluminescent spots, a trademark of my species. Sometimes, when I'm really stressed, they shine through the hologram like tiny stars breaking through cloud cover. The first bell rings, and students start flooding past me into the building. Some give me curious glances. Word has already spread that the new alien ambassador's kid is starting today. A group of girls walks by, whispering and giggling. I catch fragments of their conversation, heard they eat through their fingers. And, probably here to spy on us. I clench my fists, feeling my spots starting to glow. Deep breaths, Kira. Deep breaths. Hey, you must be the new student. A cheerful voice breaks through my spiral of anxiety. I turn to see a girl with wild curly hair and glasses too big for her face. I'm Riley. I'm supposed to be your student guide. She doesn't seem fazed by who or what I am. Don't worry about those other kids. They're still freaking out because the cafeteria started serving plant-based options. I can't help but smile. I'm Kira, I say, thankful that the universal translator embedded in my hologram modifier makes my voice sound natural. And yes, I'm the new student. Though I guess everyone already knows that. Well, they think they know, Riley says, rolling her eyes. But all they're going off of is whatever garbage they've seen in movies or read online. Did you know someone started a rumor that Centaurians can hypnotize people with their belly buttons? I burst out laughing. We don't even have belly buttons. As Riley leads me into the school, I start to relax a little. The hallways are crowded with students, some rushing to class, others lounging by their lockers. It's not so different from the education centers back home, except for the distinct lack of anti-gravity corridors and telepathic study groups. Everything's going fine until we reach my assigned locker. As I'm trying to figure out the primitive combination lock, seriously, Earth tech can be so archaic, I hear a voice behind me that makes my spots flare with anxiety. So, this is what all the fuss is about. The voice belongs to a tall boy wearing what I assume is a sports jacket. He's surrounded by a group of equally athletic-looking students. Gotta say, I expected something more. Alien. That's Blake Thompson, Riley whispers. His dad's some big-shot politician who's been vocal about opposing the Interstellar Alliance. Suddenly, the weight of my father's words hits me harder than ever. I'm not just a new student trying to fit in. I'm a symbol of everything some people fear and resist about Earth's growing connection with other civilizations. The success of our mission could depend on how well I integrate. But what if integration is impossible? Blake takes a step closer, his expression unreadable. My father says your people are here to steal our resources and corrupt our way of life. What do you have to say about that? I feel every eye in the hallway turn toward us. My spots are definitely glowing now, creating a faint shimmer through my hologram. In this moment, I have a choice to make. I could try to disappear, to blend in and avoid confrontation. That would certainly be easier. Or I could stand up not just for myself, but for everything my presence on Earth represents. I straighten my spine, letting just enough of my natural luminescence show through to create a subtle aurora around me. Back home, it's a sign of confidence and strength. Here, it makes a few students gasp and step back. But I notice others leaning forward, their eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Your father is entitled to his opinion, I say, my voice steady despite my racing hearts, yes, plural. But I'm not here to steal anything or corrupt anyone. I'm just here to learn about your world, your culture, and maybe help you learn a bit about mine too. And who knows? Maybe by the end of the school year, you'll realize that being different doesn't always mean being dangerous. The hallway falls silent. Blake's expression shifts, just slightly, from confrontation to curiosity? But before he can respond, the second bell rings, and the spell is broken. Students scramble to their classes, leaving me standing there with Riley, my heart still pounding. That was amazing! Riley exclaims, bouncing on her toes. Did you see their faces when you started glowing? So cool! You have to teach me how to make an entrance like that. I laugh, but my mind is already racing ahead. This is just the first day, the first challenge. There will be many more. But maybe, just maybe, that's not such a bad thing. After all, bridges aren't built in a day, and the best stories aren't either. As Riley and I head to our first class, I can't help but wonder what other adventures await me in these halls. One thing's for sure, this year is going to be anything but boring. And somewhere between the cultural misunderstandings, potential diplomatic incidents, and standard high school drama, I might just find my place in this strange, beautiful, complicated world. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would change not only my life but the relationship between two worlds forever. The rest of my first day passed in a blur of curious stares and whispered conversations. By lunch period, my confrontation with Blake had already become the stuff of school legend, with each retelling becoming more dramatic than the last. I heard one freshman swearing she saw me levitate, I wish, while another claimed I'd turn Blake into a toad, if only we Centaurians had that ability. Riley led me to what she called her sanctuary, a quiet corner of the cafeteria near the large windows overlooking the school's courtyard. Her two friends were already there, Alex, a quiet boy with paint-stained fingers and a sketchbook full of incredible alien designs, though his interpretation of Centaurians made me laugh. We definitely don't have tentacles, and Olivia, whose rapid-fire questions about my home world showed a genuine curiosity that was refreshing after all the suspicious glances I'd been getting. So, you really have two hearts? Olivia asked, leaning forward with fascination. How does that even work? I was about to explain our unique cardiovascular system when I noticed Blake and his friends at a nearby table, clearly eavesdropping. Instead of lowering my voice, I decided to speak up. Let them listen, maybe they'd learn something. It's actually pretty interesting, I said, loud enough to carry. Our binary cardiovascular system evolved because of Alpha Centauri's intense radiation. One heart processes oxygen like yours does, while the other filters out harmful particles. That's also why we glow. The bioluminescence helps us expel excess energy. That's so cool! Alex exclaimed, already sketching in his notebook. Can you control the colors? Like make patterns and stuff? I grinned and concentrated, letting a subtle wave of rainbow hues ripple through my hologram. Several nearby students gasped, and I heard the distinctive click of someone taking a photo. Great, I'd probably end up on social media by dinner time. Speaking of cool alien stuff, Riley interjected, are you going to join any clubs? The science club would probably worship you as their new goddess. Actually, I said, lowering my voice slightly, I was thinking about trying out for the dance team. All three of them stared at me. The Roosevelts? Olivia whispered, eyes wide. But they're like hardcore. And Caroline Chin is the captain. What's wrong with Caroline Chin? I asked, though I had a feeling I knew the answer. I'd seen her in the hallway earlier, surrounded by her team, looking like she'd stepped out of a teen movie about popular high school queens. Nothing's wrong with her, Riley said carefully. She's just intense. And her mom is on the city council. One of the ones who voted against allowing alien businesses in the downtown district. Of course. More politics. Sometimes it felt like I couldn't escape them, even here. But maybe that was the point, maybe this was exactly where I needed to be. Well, I said, pulling up the tryout information on my tablet. Thankfully Earth Tech was compatible with our systems now. The tryouts are next week. And you know what? I think it's time to show everyone that Centaurians can do more than just glow in the dark. What I didn't mention was that back home, I'd been training in our traditional crystal dances since I could walk. The movements were similar to Earth Ballet, but with an added dimension of light play, our natural bioluminescence creating patterns and stories in the air as we moved. I'd been practicing Earth dance styles in secret for months, preparing for exactly this kind of opportunity. After lunch, I had advanced physics with Mr. Rodriguez, who turned out to be one of those rare teachers who could make quantum mechanics sound like an exciting story rather than a headache-inducing equation fest. He was in the middle of explaining string theory when the classroom door opened, and Blake Thompson walked in late, holding a pass. The only empty seat was next to me. I could feel my spots starting to flicker with anxiety as he sat down, but I forced myself to stay calm. Mr. Rodriguez paired us up for the day's lab exercise, and suddenly I was stuck working with the guy who tried to intimidate me just hours ago. Look, Blake said quietly as we set up our experiment, about this morning. I waited, keeping my eyes on the equipment we were supposed to be calibrating. My dad's having this big fundraising dinner tonight, he continued, adjusting a lens with more care than necessary. A bunch of politicians and their families will be there. He's probably going to use what happened in the hallway as proof that alien students are disruptive. I nearly dropped the laser pointer I was holding. Is that supposed to be an apology or a warning? Neither. Both. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his gesture. It's just, everything's changing so fast. 5 years ago, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now there are alien embassies in every major city, interstellar trade agreements, cultural exchange programs. Some people are scared. And your father uses that fear to gain political power, I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. It's more complicated than that. Blake's voice dropped even lower. There are things happening. Things that don't make sense. My dad's been having these private meetings with people I've never seen before. Last week, I overheard him talking about something called Project Eclipse. When I asked him about it, he got really weird and said I should focus on football instead of politics. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my hearts were racing. Project Eclipse? I'd heard those words before, whispered between my parents late at night when they thought I was asleep. Whatever it was, it had them worried. Why are you telling me this? I asked, finally looking at him directly. Blake met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty there instead of hostility. Because I think my dad's gotten involved in something bigger than local politics. And maybe I'm not as sure about everything as I'm supposed to be. Before I could respond, Mr. Rodriguez called the class to attention, asking each pair to share their results. As Blake presented our findings, perfectly, I noticed apparently he wasn't just a jock. I couldn't help but wonder what I'd gotten myself into. A mysterious project, secret meetings, political intrigue. This was starting to feel less like high school drama and more like some kind of conspiracy. As the final bell rang and students began packing up, I felt my communication device vibrate. It was a message from my father, emergency meeting at the embassy. Something's happened. Stay with your friend Riley until I can pick you up. I stared at the screen, my bioluminescence creating tiny constellations of worry beneath my hologram. What kind of emergency? Was it connected to what Blake had told me about Project Eclipse? One thing was certain: my attempt at a normal high school experience was getting more complicated by the hour. And somehow, I had a feeling that dance team tryouts were going to be the least of my worries. Riley's house turned out to be a cozy 2-story building with a garden full of wind chimes that reminded me of the crystal forests back home. As we waited for news from my father, I tried to focus on practicing my dance routine for next week's tryouts, but my mind kept wandering to that mysterious message and Blake's words about Project Eclipse. "You're doing that constellation thing again," Riley pointed out, looking up from her homework. She was right. My anxiety was making my bioluminescent spots shine through the hologram in distinct patterns. "Want to talk about what's really bothering you?" I hesitated. How much could I share? How much did I even know? Have you ever felt like you're standing on the edge of something huge, but you can't quite see what it is? Riley set down her tablet and gave me her full attention. "Is this about the emergency at the embassy?" "Partly." I sank down onto her bedroom floor, letting my hologram flicker slightly. It felt good to not have to maintain it perfectly around her. "But it's also about something Blake Thompson told me in physics. About his dad and these secret meetings about something called Project Eclipse." Riley's eyes widened. "Wait a minute." She jumped up and started digging through her closet, eventually pulling out what looked like an old newspaper. "My mom keeps archives of everything. She's a journalist. Look at this." The article was from 3 months ago, buried in the back pages. It detailed a series of unexplained power fluctuations at research facilities near major alien embassies. The reporter Riley's mom had noted a pattern but couldn't prove anything concrete. At the bottom was a quote from an anonymous source mentioning something called the Eclipse Initiative. "My mom's been investigating this," Riley said, her voice dropping to a whisper despite us being alone in the house. "She thinks there's some kind of organized movement working against the Interstellar Alliance. But every time she gets close to proof, her sources disappear." My hearts felt like they were beating out of sync. Disappear how? They stop returning calls, change jobs suddenly, move away without warning. Last week, her main contact at the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs just vanished. Left everything behind: house, car, even their dog. Before I could process this, my communication device lit up with a message from my father: "Coming to get you now. Stay inside." The urgency in his usually calm tone made my spots pulse with worry. I quickly strengthened my hologram just as headlights swept across Riley's window. But it wasn't my father's diplomatic vehicle outside. 3 black SUVs had parked across the street. Riley's phone buzzed a text from her mom: "Don't leave the house. People watching newsroom. Be safe." "We need to get out of here," I whispered, my heart's pounding so hard my hologram was starting to glitch. "Now." "The back door," Riley said, already moving. "Through the kitchen." We crept downstairs, staying away from windows. I could hear car doors opening outside, footsteps on the front walk. Riley's wind chimes were singing a frantic melody in the growing night breeze. Just as we reached the kitchen, headlights flooded the backyard. "More vehicles." "Up," I said, grabbing Riley's hand. "Back upstairs. I have an idea." We raced back to her room just as someone started knocking on the front door. Hard, authoritative knocks that seemed to shake the whole house. "Remember how you asked if Centaurians could levitate?" I whispered, my spots now glowing so brightly that my hologram was barely holding. "We can't. But we can do something else." "Do you trust me?" Riley nodded without hesitation, even as the knocking downstairs turned to pounding. I pulled off my hologram modifier, letting my true form shine at full strength. In the darkness of her room, My bioluminescent spots created a dazzling display of light and color. Back home, we used this ability for art and celebration. Tonight, it might save our lives. Close your eyes, I told Riley. When I say now, run exactly where I tell you. Don't open them no matter what. The front door splintered open downstairs. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. I took a deep breath and let loose with every bit of bioluminescent energy I had, turning Riley's bedroom into a supernova of pulsing, swirling light. Even with their eyes closed, anyone looking would be temporarily blinded by the intensity. A shout from the hallway. The sound of people stumbling, cursing. Now! I grabbed Riley's hand. 3 steps left, duck under the desk, push through the panel. I'd noticed it earlier, a section of wall that echoed differently when you tapped it. Sure enough, as we pushed, a hidden door swung open into what looked like a narrow passage between the walls. Mom's escape route, Riley whispered as we squeezed inside. From back when she was investigating corporate corruption. It leads to the neighbor's garage. As we closed the panel behind us, I heard her bedroom door burst open, followed by more shouts of confusion. My light show would give them something to think about, but we didn't have much time. My communication device buzzed again. Where are you? Multiple reports of unusual light activity. I typed back quickly, safe with Riley. Hidden. People came. Connected to Eclipse? His response made my heart stop. Get to the embassy now. They're making their move tonight. Everything we feared is happening. In the darkness of the secret passage, Riley squeezed my hand. Whatever's going on, you're not facing it alone. I squeezed back, my spots creating just enough light to see by as we crept toward whatever waited at the end of this tunnel. One thing was certain, my dad had been right about me being a bridge between worlds. I just hadn't realized I might also have to help save them both. The neighbor's garage was dark and cluttered when we emerged from the hidden passage, our hearts pounding from the narrow escape. I'd managed to reactivate my hologram modifier, though it kept flickering like a bad video connection. Riley was already tapping away at her phone, trying to reach her mother. No signal, she muttered, then froze as headlights swept across the garage windows. We ducked behind a stack of boxes just as a vehicle pulled into the driveway. Please tell me your neighbors are home, I whispered. They're in Florida for the winter, Riley replied, her voice tight with worry. Nobody should be here. The car door opened and closed. Footsteps on gravel. Then, unexpectedly, a familiar voice. Kira? Riley? Are you in there? It's Blake. We stayed hidden, my spots pulsing with uncertainty beneath my unstable hologram. It could be a trap. After everything we'd learned about his father's involvement with Project Eclipse, how could we trust him? I know you're here, Blake continued, closer now. I followed the SUVs. They're coordinating search patterns through the neighborhood, but I know a way past their perimeter. My dad's people aren't as clever as they think they are. Your dad's people? I called out, still not moving. So you admit they're working together? Yes, Blake said, and there was something raw in his voice that made me pause. But that's not all. I found out what Project Eclipse really is, and Kira. It's worse than anything we imagine. They're not just trying to stop the Interstellar Alliance. They're trying to sever it permanently. A chill ran through me, making my spots flare bright enough to shine through the boxes. What do you mean, sever it? The power fluctuations your dad's been investigating? They're tests. They're building some kind of device that can disrupt the quantum tunneling technology that makes interstellar travel possible. If they succeed, Earth will be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. No more trade, no more cultural exchange, no more anything. We'll be alone again. But that would strand thousands of aliens on Earth, I gasped, finally stepping out from behind the boxes. And thousands of humans on other worlds. The economic collapse alone would. That's the point, Blake interrupted. Create enough chaos to justify martial law. round up all the extraterrestrials for their own safety. My father and his allies would emerge as the strong leaders who saved humanity from alien influence. Riley had pulled out her mother's old newspaper article again. The power fluctuations. They were measuring the radius of effect. That's why they happen near the embassies. They're planning to target all of them at once. Tonight, Blake confirmed. During the fundraising dinner, all the major players will have alibis, surrounded by witnesses while their device does its work. My dad thought he was being clever, making me attend to keep up appearances. He didn't realize I'd planted a bug in his study last week. Why are you helping us? I asked, still not entirely convinced. This morning you were practically leading the anti-alien charge. Blake's expression tightened. Because this morning I thought it was all just politics. I didn't know they were planning to tear families apart and destroy lives. And he hesitated, then pushed on. I saw the guest list for tonight. Your father's not supposed to survive the chaos. My spots went dark, a Centaurian reaction to extreme shock. What? They're going to blame the destruction of the quantum tunneling network on a malfunction at the Centaurian embassy. A tragic accident that proves Earth isn't ready for alien technology. Your father would be the perfect scapegoat, except they can't risk him surviving to deny it. A distant siren broke the tension. Red and blue lights started flickering at the end of the street. We're out of time, Blake said urgently. My car's around the corner. I can get us to the embassy before wait, Riley interrupted, holding up her phone. The signal had returned, along with a series of rapid-fire texts from her mother, device location confirmed. Under City Hall. Access through old tunnel system. Sending map. The fundraising dinner, Blake realized. It's at City Hall. They're literally hosting the party right on top of their doomsday device. I looked at my own device, at my father's increasingly worried messages. The embassy was clearly under surveillance. If we went there, we'd be walking right into their trap. But if we tried to stop Project Eclipse ourselves, how good are you at crashing parties? I asked Blake, an idea forming. Pretty good, he replied, catching on. Especially since I'm technically supposed to be at this one. And how are you at dealing with security systems? I asked Riley, remembering how quickly she'd handled the secret passage. She grinned, already pulling up the city blueprints her mother had sent. Let's just say this isn't the first time I've helped Mom get into places she's not supposed to be. More sirens in the distance. The search was intensifying. We had maybe an hour before the device would be activated, and no way to warn my father without compromising him further. 3 teenagers against a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. The odds weren't exactly in our favor. But as I looked at my unlikely allies, the conspiracy theorist's daughter and the son of the man who wanted to destroy everything I cared about, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Okay, I said, letting my hologram stabilize into something that would pass for a wealthy donor's daughter at a political fundraiser. Let's go crash a party and save the world. Little did I know, the real surprise of the evening wasn't going to be the secret device under City Hall. It was going to be what we discovered about Project Eclipse's true origins and the shocking identity of its actual mastermind. Breaking into City Hall turned out to be the easy part. Blake's invitation got us past the front security. My enhanced hologram made me look like I belonged among the wealthy donors, and Riley's tech skills handled the rest. The hard part came when we discovered what was really waiting for us in the tunnels below. That's not what I expected, Riley whispered as we stared at the massive device humming in the center of the underground chamber. Unlike the crude prototype Blake had described from his father's files, this machine was clearly of alien origin. The crystalline architecture and pulsing energy patterns were unmistakably Centaurian. My spots flickered with recognition. This is impossible. This technology shouldn't exist outside our homeworld's secure facilities. Why? Blake asked, keeping watch near the maintenance tunnel we'd used for access. What exactly are we looking at? It's a quantum resonance amplifier, I explained, moving closer to examine the familiar yet modified design. We developed them to help stabilize our first interstellar portals, but this one's been altered. Instead of stabilizing quantum tunnels, it could collapse them permanently. But how did they get their hands on it? Riley was already connecting her tablet to what looked like an access port, her fingers flying over the screen. And why would anyone from your world help them cut Earth off from the rest of the galaxy? That's when I heard it, a soft laugh that made my heart stop. A laugh I'd known my entire life. Because sometimes, dear one, the only way to save a species is to isolate it. I turned slowly, my spots pulsing with shock. Mom? She stood in the doorway of a hidden control room, still wearing her diplomatic attire from this morning, but her hologram was gone. Her natural Centaurian form glowed with the intensity I'd never seen before. Did you really think your father was the only one playing a long game? She moved toward us with fluid grace. Humans aren't ready for integration into the galactic community. They're too volatile, too unpredictable. Look how quickly they turned against us, how easily fear took root. That's not true, I protested, thinking of Riley's immediate acceptance, of Blake's choice to help us despite everything he'd been taught. You're the one spreading fear. You're working with people who hate us. I'm working with people who understand the natural order, she corrected. Your friend Blake's father and his associates think they're protecting Earth from alien influence. They don't realize they're just pawns in a much larger game. Riley's tablet beeped. The device is powering up, she warned. 10 minutes until it reaches critical threshold. My mother smiled. Just in time for the ambassador's big speech upstairs. When the quantum tunneling network collapses, they'll blame your father and the radical elements pushing for faster integration. Earth will retreat into isolation, and the Centaurian Council will finally understand that some species need more time to evolve. You're wrong, Blake said suddenly, stepping forward. Show her, Riley. Riley's fingers flew across her tablet, and the chamber's hidden screens flickered to life. On them, hundreds of images and videos began playing, humans and aliens working together, helping each other, building something new. Street festivals where children played with young Centaurians, hospitals where alien healing techniques saved human lives, schools where different species learned from each other. Your natural order is already obsolete, I told my mother, understanding finally dawning. That's what really scares you, isn't it? Not that humans aren't ready, but that they're adapting faster than anyone expected. Faster than we did? You don't understand the complexities, she began, but I cut her off. No, I understand perfectly. I've been living them every day at school. Change is messy and scary, and sometimes people fight it. But it's happening anyway, and trying to stop it will only cause more pain. I reached for the quantum amplifier, letting my natural energy connect with its crystals. As half-human designs had revolutionized our technology, maybe a half-Centaurian could do something unprecedented with it. Kira, don't! My mother moved to stop me, but Blake and Riley stepped between us. Trust your daughter, Riley said firmly. Like she trusted us. My spots blazed as I poured everything I had into the device, not to destroy it, but to change its fundamental frequency. The crystals responded, their energy patterns shifting from destruction to creation. Where it would have collapsed quantum tunnels, it now began strengthening them, weaving them together in ways that had never been attempted. The chamber filled with light as new connections formed. Above us, I could sense quantum tunnels stabilizing, multiplying, creating bridges where there had been barriers. My mother's plan hadn't just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. What have you done? She whispered, staring at the readings that now filled every screen. Created a stronger bridge, I managed to say, though maintaining the connection was draining my energy rapidly. One that can't be broken by fear or politics. The last thing I saw before passing out was my father bursting into the chamber with security forces, his expression shifting from worry to understanding as he took in the scene. As consciousness faded, I heard Riley explaining everything to him, her voice full of pride. I woke up 3 days later in the embassy's medical wing. Riley and Blake were there, arguing about whether the school would accept saving the world as an excuse for missing Monday's history test. On the news playing quietly in the corner, reporters were covering the unprecedented strengthening of Earth's connection to the galactic community, though no one seemed quite sure how it had happened. And why Mother was under custody of the Centaurian Council, along with several human conspirators. But her actions had ironically achieved the opposite of her intentions. Humans and aliens were now more integrated than ever, connected by quantum tunnels that I had somehow transformed from weapons into bridges. So Riley said when she noticed I was awake, about those dance team tryouts. I laughed, then grimaced at my still depleted energy levels. I think I've had enough drama for a while. Too bad, Blake grinned. Because Caroline Chin saw your light show through the city hall windows. She's already reserved you a spot on the team. Apparently, you're a revolutionary talent. Looking at my friends, human and half-human, former enemies turned allies, I realized that maybe that's what we all were, revolutionary talents, building something new together, one connection at a time. As if to prove the point, my spots had started glowing in a pattern I'd never seen before, creating shapes that seemed to combine Centaurian and human designs. Another bridge between worlds, as natural as breathing. And this time, no one was trying to tear it down. The weeks following this City Hall incident passed in a blur of debriefings, media speculation, and surprisingly, dance practice. Caroline Chin turned out to be nothing like I'd expected. She was tough but fair, and absolutely fascinated by how I could incorporate my natural bioluminescence into our routines. The Roosevelts were about to have their most unique season yet. My father spent most of his time in emergency meetings with both Earth and Centaurian authorities, working to establish new protocols for the enhanced quantum tunnels. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My mother's attempt to isolate Earth had instead created the strongest connection between worlds in galactic history. The new network was already being called the Aurora Bridge by the media, though Riley insisted on calling it the Kira Connection, much to my embarrassment. You have to admit, it has a nice ring to it, she said one afternoon as we sat in our usual spot in the cafeteria. Alex was sketching what he called quantum-enhanced dance moves for our upcoming performance, while Olivia peppered me with questions about the physics behind the new tunnels. I still don't really understand how I did it, I admitted, watching my spots create tiny auroras under my now optional hologram. Since the incident, more aliens at school had started showing their true forms, though most of us still used holograms for convenience. It was like the crystals knew what they wanted to become. I just helped them get there. Sometimes the best innovations come from not knowing something's supposed to be impossible, Blake said, joining us with his lunch tray. The sight of him sitting at our table no longer turned heads. The school had gradually adjusted to this new normal, where the former anti-alien spokesperson was best friends with the ambassador's daughter. His father and several other conspirators were awaiting trial, but Blake had chosen a different path. He'd started a student organization dedicated to interspecies cultural exchange, turning his political connections toward building bridges instead of walls. The group already had chapters opening in other schools across the country. Speaking of impossible things, Riley interjected, pulling up something on her tablet, you all need to see what Mom's working on now. It was a draft of her mother's upcoming expose, detailing not just Project Eclipse but the larger pattern of fear and resistance that had made it possible. But instead of focusing on the conspiracy, the article emphasized how it had been defeated not through force or politics, but through teenagers from different worlds choosing to trust each other. She's interviewing students from other schools too, Riley explained excitedly. Apparently, what happened here wasn't unique. All over the world, young humans and aliens have been quietly becoming friends, sharing cultures, figuring out how to make integration work. The adults were so busy arguing about whether it was possible, they didn't notice it was already happening. That's why my mother's plan was always doomed to fail, I realized. She was so focused on the big picture, on trying to control how our worlds came together, that she missed the small moments that were already changing everything. Speaking of changes, Blake said, shifting uncomfortably, I heard from my dad this morning. He's agreed to testify about everyone involved in Project Eclipse, including the other Centaurian collaborators. My spots dimmed slightly. I still hadn't visited my mother in detention. Part of me wasn't ready to face her, to hear her explanations or justifications. But another part understood that fear, even misguided fear, came from a place of caring. She wasn't wrong about everything, I said slowly. Integration is complicated. There are cultural misunderstandings, technological gaps, prejudices to overcome. But that's exactly why we need more connections, not fewer. Well, you certainly made that point dramatically, Olivia laughed. I mean, who else can say they literally rewrote the laws of physics to bring people together? About that, I reached into my bag and pulled out a tablet displaying the latest scientific analysis of the Aurora Bridge. The quantum modifications weren't random. Look at the pattern. The others leaned in, studying the complex energy signatures that now connected Earth to the galactic community. Within the seemingly chaotic swirls of quantum data, there was a clear structure, one that looked remarkably like a double helix. It's like DNA, Alex whispered, already sketching. But instead of building organisms, it's building relationships, Riley finished. Connecting different species at the quantum level, making something entirely new. The scientists think it might be affecting more than just transportation, I explained. The new tunnels seem to be facilitating understanding somehow. People using them report feeling more empathy, more openness to different perspectives. It's like they're not just bridges between places, but between minds and hearts too. So you didn't just save the world, Blake grinned. You gave it an empathy upgrade. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As we gathered our things, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the cafeteria window, a Centaurian, 3 humans, and countless possibilities. My spots were creating patterns that seemed to echo the quantum bridges connecting our worlds, as if my very biology was celebrating these new connections. Oh hey, Riley said as we headed to class, don't forget my mom's hosting that interspecies dinner party tonight. Half the guests are bringing Earth dishes, half are bringing alien specialties. Including those color-changing Centaurian crystal cakes? Alex asked hopefully. Of course, I laughed. Though I should warn you, they don't just change color, they also temporarily make you glow in the dark. Even better! As we walked through the halls of Roosevelt High, I thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. The school that had once felt like a battlefield was now a real community, where differences were celebrated instead of feared. Sure, there were still challenges to face and problems to solve, but we were facing them together, one quantum connection at a time. My father had been right, I was a bridge between worlds. But he hadn't realized that I wasn't the only one. Every person who chose understanding over fear, every friendship that crossed the boundaries of species or culture, every moment of genuine connection. They were all bridges, weaving together a future that was richer and more beautiful than any single world could be alone. That evening, as I watched humans and aliens sharing food and stories at Riley's house, their faces lit by both earth lamps and bioluminescent glows, I felt my spots creating a new pattern, not quite Centaurian, not quite human, but something wonderfully in between. Just like me. And really, that's what this whole adventure had been about, finding the courage to be yourself, especially when yourself turns out to be something entirely new. Whether you're an alien ambassador's daughter trying to survive high school, a human learning to see beyond their prejudices, or anyone else trying to bridge the gap between who you are and who you could be, the key is to keep building those connections, one quantum leap at a time. As if to emphasize the point, someone turned on the music. And soon the living room was full of humans and aliens attempting to learn each other's traditional dances. I joined in, letting my spots create patterns in the air that matched the rhythm of Earth music, creating yet another bridge between our worlds. Sometimes the best revolutions don't come from grand political gestures or secret scientific projects. Sometimes they come from a group of high school students who decide to give each other a chance, from a daughter who chooses to believe in connection over isolation, from countless small moments of trust and understanding that add up to something greater than anyone could have planned. And if you look closely, on any given day at Roosevelt High, you might just see the future being born one friendship, one dance step, one quantum bridge at a time.